It was a crisp, clear morning in the heart of the city, the kind of morning that made the glass towers gleam like polished silver. The elevator hummed as it ascended, carrying with it a mix of people dressed in suits that spoke of wealth and power, their faces unreadable. The sleek lobby of the building buzzed with quiet, sterile efficiency, where everything had its place and everyone knew their role. Hello friends, if you new here then don't forget to hit subscribe button, and if you like then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you from watching this video. It was a world built on assumptions, on layers of prestige that defined who belonged and who didn't. Malcolm Reed stood in the elevator, his posture composed, eyes focused on the floor numbers above. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit, his dark skin standing in stark contrast to the polished marble around him. He didn't belong here, not in their eyes, not in this space of high-rise power and influence. But what they didn't know was that Malcolm was no outsider. He was the CEO of a $3.2 billion empire and the man who would soon disrupt their delicate world. As the elevator doors opened, a board member, his name was Henry Langston, caught sight of Malcolm and let out a laugh, his voice laced with disdain. He glanced Malcolm over, sizing him up. "Wrong floor," he muttered with a smirk, the words carrying the weight of 1,000 silent assumptions. The awkward chuckle of an analyst by his side punctuated the air. But Malcolm said nothing. His silence was deliberate, unsettling. The tension in the elevator thickened. Henry's gaze flickered between Malcolm's composed expression and his own arrogance, not yet understanding the storm that was about to come crashing down. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that Malcolm was already playing a different game. A game they would soon lose. What happens next will make you question everything about power, race, and the true meaning of success. Want to know more? Like this video. Subscribe to Real Life Stories New. The story's just getting started. The elevator door slid open, and Henry Langston's eyes flicked over the man who had stepped inside. A split-second judgment crossed his face, one born from years of privilege and power. The man, dressed in a tailored suit, appeared out of place in this towering corporate world. The look of disdain was subtle but clear as Henry glanced at the stranger's dark skin. "Wrong floor," Henry said, his voice loud enough to catch the analyst beside him, who let out a nervous laugh. The elevator's confined space seemed to amplify the awkwardness. But the stranger, Malcolm Reed, remained still. His face was calm, his posture unwavering. And in that moment, Henry thought it was just another insignificant encounter, until it wasn't. Minutes later, the door of the boardroom opened, and Henry walked in with the same arrogant air he always carried. But this time, something was different. Malcolm Reed, the same man Henry had dismissed in the elevator, was sitting at the front, calm, composed, as if he belonged there. Despite the cold stares from other executives, Henry's surprise flickered, but he quickly masked it. He wasn't going to let anyone steal his spotlight. Not this man. Not today. Didn't expect him to make it past security, Henry muttered to his colleague, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But instead of the familiar chuckle of compliance, the room shifted in response. Henry felt it. Malcolm wasn't just another player in this game. He was here to change the rules. Malcolm's silence spoke volumes. He didn't try to answer Henry's jab. Didn't flinch at the judgment. And it unsettled Henry more than he could admit. As the meeting progressed, Henry felt the tension mounting. He could sense the shift in the air, like a subtle shift in the tides. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just another business deal. This was a confrontation. The world he had built, the empire he controlled with calculated ease, was now being questioned by someone he had overlooked. When the floor opened for questions, Henry saw his chance to reassert control. He leaned forward, ready to engage, ready to dominate the conversation. But then Malcolm stood. His voice was quiet, measured, and as he spoke, every word cut through the room like a precise blade. "Leadership today isn't about dominance," Malcolm said, his tone calm but firm. "It's about adaptability, cultural understanding, and true influence. Real leadership isn't just about looking the part. It's about making a difference. Henry clenched his jaw. Audacity. The nerve. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. And where exactly have you demonstrated those ideas? Henry shot back, unable to hide his irritation. His voice dripped with skepticism, trying to diminish Malcolm, to shrink him back into something he could control. Malcolm didn't even blink. Multinational trade optimization. Multi-billion-dollar capital management. My company has been doing this for years, he replied calmly. The room went silent. Henry's attempts at control dissolved in that silence, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. This wasn't just a battle for the room anymore. It was a battle for power, for the future, and it was slipping through his fingers. Later, during a keynote panel, Henry thought he could salvage the situation. He had worked behind the scenes to push Malcolm's panel into a less visible time slot. He was trying to suppress Malcolm, to keep the narrative under his control. But when the time came, Malcolm stood at the center of the stage. The lights dimmed, and the crowd's attention turned, not to Henry, but to Malcolm. He spoke again, and this time his words were sharper, hitting harder. Leadership isn't about appearance. It's about presence. Real leadership is earned by what you contribute, not by the titles you hold or the suits you wear. The air in the room changed. Henry, who had spent years building a reputation as the top dog in the room, was now just another face in the crowd. The more Malcolm spoke, the more the room gravitated towards him. Every word Malcolm spoke undermined the control Henry had so carefully maintained. Henry's fists clenched under the table. He could feel the shift. The people around him, once respectful, now looked at Malcolm, not him. It burned like a slow fire, creeping across the boardroom. The real turning point came when the company's quarterly review meeting arrived. Henry sat with the confidence of someone who had weathered storms before. But this time, the storm wasn't something he could control. Malcolm, with quiet precision, announced that Vanguard Nexus, his company, had acquired 42% of the stock in Henry's firm, making him an equal player in the game. Henry froze. The walls that had once seemed impenetrable around his power, his control, were crumbling. Malcolm didn't gloat. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any boastful words could. The deal was done, and it had irrevocably shifted the balance of power. As Malcolm calmly explained the terms of the deal, Henry's world began to unravel. He could no longer mask the fact that his influence, his control, had evaporated. The meeting ended with a vote. It was unanimous. Malcolm Reed would now co-chair the advisory board. His leadership team would have equal power. And Henry's reign was over. The following weeks were filled with headlines. CEO Henry Langston removed from the board amid racism allegations. Boardroom reckoning, new leadership rises as Langston falls. The press had a field day with his downfall. Every article peeled back another layer of Henry's carefully constructed image. The once untouchable executive was now the subject of mockery, his name synonymous with failure. But the real impact wasn't in the public disgrace. It was in the lessons Henry had learned too late. The world had changed. And Malcolm had shown him just how far behind he was. Power built on arrogance and prejudice couldn't withstand the weight of true leadership, one that valued inclusion, respect, and strength through humility. And so, as Henry's empire crumbled, he found himself sitting in a small vocational training center, not the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, but a man who had lost everything. He was now among those he once looked down upon, teaching, listening, and learning what it truly meant to lead. In the end, Henry Langston didn't just lose his job. He lost his sense of self. But in that loss, he gained something far more valuable, a lesson in humility and the realization that power isn't just something you wield, it's something you earn through actions, through respect, and through understanding others. And as for Malcolm Reed? He wasn't just a CEO. He was a reminder to the world that true leadership doesn't come from titles, wealth, or status. It comes from the quiet strength of doing what's right, no matter the cost. The world changed that day. And those who failed to see it would learn the hard way. In the end, Malcolm Reed didn't just win a boardroom battle, he exposed the truth. True leadership is about integrity, respect, and the courage to challenge what's wrong. Henry Langston, once a symbol of power, found himself facing the consequences of arrogance and prejudice. But his downfall wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of his awakening. And for us, the lesson is clear: power built on the wrong values won't last. As we reflect on this story, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of leaders do we want to be? Is it about titles and control, or is it about real impact, understanding, and fairness? If this story made you think, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to Real Life Stories New. We're just getting started. What's your take on the real cost of power? Let us know in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going.